Hey everybody, today I've got this giant stance bike and I'm going to kind of give it a review and compare it to the Polygon and the Ozark Trail full suspensions that are out around that $1,000 price point. I think the Giant is a really good competitor between those two, this giant stance. And this summer, the last few months, it's been for sale. I've seen it. My customer bought this summer for $750. It's been for sale $750 to like $1,000. Right now there's websites selling it for $899. And I think it's a good bike, and I think it's kind of the level of quality of bike that you would need to get into the sport and not get beat up. Later in the video, I've got my 1992 Stumpjumper. It's a fully rigid hardtail. I rode that last summer halfway up to the mountain peak by my house, and I could do it, but afterwards my body was beat up. So when you think about, like, people say just buy a 90s bike or just buy a hardtail, and there's advantages to that, but just like buying, I kind of equate it, people kind of get the concept of going trail running in like King boots or going trail running in like a pair of hookahs. Is that how you say it? You know, those big foamy shoes? And those foam shoes, they're not as durable as a nice pair of boots, but you're not going to get beat up as much trail running, hiking up mountains in those types of running shoes, those trail shoes that are made to give more. So there's pluses to buying an old 90s hardtail like my Stumpjumper. I love to ride that down the street, but I ride my bike 6 days a week. You can check out my Strava. I'm not a super fast rider, but if I did my daily mountain bike riding on anything other than a full suspension or a titanium hardtail or a steel hardtail, my body would be too beat up to ride that much. You know, I'd have to take rest days. So I like the giant stance. I know it's frustrating to hear that, like, oh, to have the best ride, you need to buy a full suspension, but you don't have to buy a full suspension. There's people who have fun on hardtails. But for me personally, my joints, they say your first suspension is your body and your joints and you move with it. But having a rear shock and having a front shock that can work properly, doesn't have to work the top of the line, doesn't have to be a Fox factory shock, but having a suspension design that works properly and that can take a lot of those hits. Every hit your shock takes and absorbs is a hit that your joints don't have to take and absorb. So going with the $1,000 mark, I say that's kind of the benchmark to get a bike that can perform and not wear you out. And going with that, there's more things to break. So you have suspension you're going to have to service. You have bearings that'll wear out. You know, so these bikes, they've been used for the kids' NICA races, and I've had to replace derailleurs from them crashing. One of the rims, he went flat on his race and rode it for a little bit without any air in the tires, and the rim got a little bent. The tire got popped. So riding bikes costs money. So if my financial situation was went really bad really quick, I wouldn't feel compelled that I have to buy I have a carbon fiber full suspension, I have a titanium hardtail, titanium fat bike. I would feel compelled to do everything in my power to buy a $1,000 full suspension bike like this giant stance, because I could ride this every day and my body wouldn't hurt and I could get the exercise that I want to get. So you really have to think about, when you're riding, you have to think about, yeah, durability is important, but you know, I think sometimes people take the durability to the extreme. Yeah, you can go trail running in a pair of hiking boots, and those boots will last 10 times longer than trail running shoes. But are you going to still enjoy trail running in hiking boots, or is your body going to be too beat up? So I haven't seen people talking about this, so I thought I'd cover it. Let me take you outside and I'll show you my stunt jumper. Hey, I'm out here outside my truck. I've got my Specialized Stumpjumper. I picked this up for $100. I put like $150 worth of parts into it. You can see it here. It's got new tires, a stem that doesn't hurt my back anymore, new chain, and I rode this thing up a mountain bike trail halfway to the top of Ben Lomond, climbed 2,400 feet on it, and I was beat up the next day. So this thing is more reliable than pretty much any bike you're gonna be able to buy now. That bike that you go to the store to buy right now, that Giant Stance, that Ozark Trail, that bike is probably not gonna last 50 more years, you know? This Specialized Stumpjumper, I expect this thing to keep running for 100 years plus. And that's really awesome. But with that durability comes, your body is kind of taking the abuse instead of the bike, if that makes sense. So it might not make sense to try to start out mountain biking with something like this if you can afford to spend the maintenance and the extra money of a entry-level full suspension or a modern entry-level hardtail that has wider tires, a little bit more comfortable geometry. You might have a little bit more fun starting to mountain bike on a new bike than an old bike, even though these old bikes are way more reliable. So I have one more thing to say about chain rings on the Stance. So I'll head back into the truck and talk about that. So my main criticism of the Giant Stance is it comes with a Praxis chainring. And the issue with the Praxis chainring is SRAM has a patent on, this is a SRAM chainring. They have a patent on the narrow wide design, and they've licensed that patent to a lot of other manufacturers, but they haven't licensed that patent to Praxis or Shimano. And Praxis, to get by this patent, they use a different patented chainring called the Wave technology. And I have noticed this Wave technology chainring, it affects the shifting on the back. And I'm not an engineer. I don't know how it does it, but I have customers that have this Giant Stance, or they have another Giant with a Praxis chainring. It doesn't shift good on the mountain. I switch it out to the SRAM chainring, the shifting gets fixed overnight. They never complain about the shifting again unless they break a derailleur or bend something. So these are only like $20. You can find them cheaper online. It's a SRAM chainring. If you get one of these bikes, the first thing I would do is switch over the chainring to something like this, and your shifting will get quite a bit better. So yeah, there's patents on things. So M-Wave technology, I'm not a fan. Sorry, whoever owns that. I think it affects the shifting. The problem is, I think it holds on to the, I'm not an engineer, I'm just guessing, but I think it holds on to the chain a little bit too good. And when you pedal, it sucks it up. So it keeps staying on the chainring and it affects the shifting that way. But it's not something that I know definitely why. Just through problem solving, it's something I've seen almost a dozen times with customers with giant bikes, and they have that issue. Another thing about giant bikes that I really like the online consumer bikes, and I like what Walmart's doing with Ozark Trail. But Giant is a manufacturer of bikes. So a Giant bike typically is about 10% cheaper than a Trek bike because they own all the means of distribution up until the point where they sell it to the bike shop. So with Trek and most other US manufacturers, they have to pay someone to manufacture the bike, and a lot of times that manufacturer has to pay someone to get the aluminum. So there's different levels. So with Giant, they own the aluminum processing all the way to bringing it overseas to the United States, to selling it to the bike shop. And there's Giant branded factory shops. So they own all the means of production. So it's a tiny bit cheaper to buy a Giant compared to anyone else. And I feel like they also kind of learn from manufacturing other brands' bikes. They learn what's the most reliable suspension design. And there's this stance uses kind of like a Specialized flex bar pivot design. Their higher end stuff mostly uses the Maestro, which is basically a ripoff of the Ibis DW Link suspension system. But it's my favorite type of suspension is the DW Link type, VPP type suspension. So yeah, chain rings, bikes. If you want to buy a 90s hardtail and go mountain biking, you can. But if you're not someone who can't afford to spend, how do I say this? If you have the money to spend $800 on a bike, spend $800 on the bike. If you don't have any money to spend $800 on a bike, you can buy a 90s hardtail. But keep in mind, if you're starting to get into biking, there is a safety issue with trying to learn mountain biking on hard trails. Depending on the trails on your area, you might end up breaking an arm, breaking a rib, just because you used outdated equipment that wasn't quite as safe as new equipment. So yeah, I think there's something to be said about the safety of the equipment. Well, what are you gonna pay for if you start out on a bike that's not quite up to snuff? You might end up paying for it down the line. So anyways, well, that's all I have today. And see you guys around. Thanks.